Hey guys, this is my first video of 2026. I don't know how your guys' 2026 is, but hopefully it's going really well. I'm praying. Today's video, I wanted to talk about forgiveness and forgiving yourself, or even like others. We're all gonna have to experience it in life where, we either do something we kind of regret, or we just have a bad situation with someone, or someone does something to us that is kind of hard to accept. It's like, why would you do that? And then the person did. Either way, vice versa. You may not know why you did something that was kind of awful, but you did it. It happens. It's like human nature. I kind of want to talk about how I learned to go over forgiveness. And my example is like with my mom. We had a really bad relationship. I had to move out. And the only way that I would allow her to get near me, because I felt completely unsafe since she was abusive, was I said we could only go through therapy, like family therapy, if she wanted to really rebuild our relationship. And I was totally open to a therapist. I had been talking to one for about a year. But anytime I launched the opportunity for it, because my mom obviously wants a relationship with her daughter, like it's every mother kind of wants to, she still would reject therapy and would not put in the effort. So I spent a lot of years unable to kind of not only forgive her for what she had done to me previous to me leaving, but it also was hard for me to just accept or forgive her for not wanting to put in the effort for a relationship as well. It's like a different type of acceptance that needs to be established in order to keep moving on, because you can't be holding on to these relationships that are just a dead end. And it obviously is not an easy thing. Like, forgiveness is never easy in any circumstance. And sometimes it's not even required. It's just the acceptance of the situation and moving on. And it took me about 5 years to really develop a census on it and truly forgive my mom and just accept her as who she is. Like, she's not going to change. She's never going to go to therapy. She's never going to fully want a relationship with me. And I have to live with that as a choice and learn how to move on from that. So I think it's really key. The biggest process with this is that you do have to admit you're wrong in the situation, which sucks. No one likes to be wrong, obviously, but it is the step you're gonna have to take if you want to finally let go of the grief and the guilt of it and just move on. For my instance, I could have been better. I could have done better things. I did a lot of intentional stuff to upset my mom because I am really petty. Like, we are the complete same person. Like, we fight each other. So in my situation, I could have seen as I could have not done something to irritate or instigate the situation. That was a flaw I had to accept. I couldn't just be like, oh, she did everything wrong. I mean, of course she's the adult in this situation, and there may be other cases where you're like, okay, well, that was my boss in this situation. I really couldn't do it, and that's okay. Just admit what even happened and just talk and see it from a third person perspective. And from that, I want you to kind of take some space and time where you just acknowledge it and see everything. Then you're going to look at that and kind of feel through your emotions through it, being like, oh, well, maybe you're the girl in the perspective or the guy or whatever. And you're like, well, they didn't deserve that, referring to you. So you're like, oh, they kind of didn't deserve that, but they also didn't need to do that. Just kind of take your time dissecting it and process the emotions of what you're seeing from a third person perspective and from what you felt through the situation. And during that time, I would definitely journal it out. In a relationship aspect, there are some people who write a letter to the person and then they burn it, just to let out all their emotions and get everything they wanted to say off their chest. Just really go in depth and find the parts where it really upset you the most. Maybe in a relationship aspect, the guy cheat on you and it makes you feel unworthy, because it's just you guys were in a relationship for such a long time and then he just wanted to cheat on you for no reason. I have to go into detail about what the underlying thing is here. What did it trigger from a childhood perspective, or even from any perspective? Did it make you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm a people pleaser again? I shouldn't have done that in this situation. I shouldn't have given that, You really have to find the underlying issue, and that's not easy. Take your time on that. It took me years to figure out. I had to go through multiple sessions of therapy to kind of see it's not just oh, well, he did me wrong. It's no, that made me upset because that made me feel like this again. You know, like find and retract the trauma or retract the emotion of where it first stemmed from, and just really kind of accept it from a larger perspective. And now, once you kind of go into that, which takes time, take your time on that, you have to kind of find acceptance in it and see it from that third person perspective. So it's like my mom, I had to find acceptance with it. You know, she didn't choose me in that aspect. She wouldn't go to therapy. That was a choice. You know, it's not like she was forced to do it. She couldn't do it. She chose not to do it. And in that aspect, it made me feel unworthy. It made me feel unwanted as a kid. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to live with that my whole life. I have to kind of just accept that and move on. I have to see it as what it is and realize that the opinion that she has now on me, other things, if she doesn't want to put the effort or the time into a relationship with me, she has no right to judge me in any aspect of my life. And she doesn't have the right to try and say things or do things to me because she did not earn that time. She did not put in the time for me, and she didn't put in the time for the relationship, so she doesn't earn the time to be on my mind like that. And that's like a hard thing as well, because you could even do it with like helping a family member. You know, if you weren't able to help a family member and you feel guilty about it, you can't forgive yourself about it because it's like, oh, I should have done something. Sometimes you just have to accept the fact that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink it. You know, we see this with like drug addicts in the family or throughout life. You know, they keep doing more and more stuff. They almost overdose. You may have saved one, you know, a family member who's like overdosing, and then they get back into rehab. And once they get out of rehab, they go right back to it. Sometimes you just have to accept the situation for what it is and just see it's a repeating pattern that they are not going to escape, whether you put in the effort or you take out the effort. So that's just a situation you kind of have to realize, like, wow, like this is never going to change. And once you kind of find that acceptance, which you take your time on as well, you kind of have to either shift. Oh, another thing is, if you don't want to find the acceptance in it, just create them into a character that they are. So like with my mom now, because I don't live with her, I moved out after this situation, I kind of had to change my view of her to accept her as a crazy lady. You know, like the random aunt, second cousin aunt that just comes over out of nowhere and just does really dumb stuff in front of you, and you're like, do I know you? Or it's like, how did you even sneak into this event? You know, you kind of just have to change it from the third person perspective and shift it into, wow, that is that person from that story. You know, the story that you made, you know, oh, this girl's boss to that, and be like, wow, he really is that boss. Like, he's just a bad person, you know? Just be like, that's really just you. Like, you're another one of that minority rate in the world. You know, you're just like one of those other crackheads. You're one of those other drug dealers, you know? Just leave it to what they are. You don't even have to look at them as like, that's my brother, you know? You don't have to look at it as that if you don't want to, because sometimes it's painful, you know? If you're not able to help a sibling, especially going through an issue like that, it's definitely better to just view it from a third perspective and be like, that's the crackhead we invited inside, you know? It's like, it's a humorous kind of way to look at it because it detaches your emotions from the situation. You know, if you're always gonna see your brother on drugs at the dinner table, it may really upset you and it might emotionally trigger you, and that's just too much energy and like too much frustration and stress for you to be dealing with, because that's his choice, unfortunately. That is his own choice, and he's going to continue to take that choice. So you can either find acceptance in it by like making them that random third person, like someone is just like far-fetched out there. And once you kind of accept them for that, you just have to go back to that situation and forgive yourself for whatever part you took in it or against it, or whatever action you took, period. Whatever that's making you feel guilty, you just have to look back at it and say, like, this is my first time living too, you know? This is the first time you've probably ever experienced that situation. You weren't fully prepared, and that's okay. You weren't supposed to expect that. You know, oh my gosh, like, I didn't know my brother was gonna turn out to be a crackhead. You're not raised into life trained how to know how to deal with that. Life is an experience that keeps happening. There's gonna be another scenario where, oh my gosh, you know, you find out your uncle is like doing drugs too, and then it's gonna be more and more. It's not your responsibility. It's not your fault. and you're only processing it with the time that you're granted throughout the situation. You don't know when things are revealed and accelerated in any space of time, you know? So it's kind of good for you to realize, like, in that situation that happened, it's not my fault. Or even if it is my fault, I'm still learning from it and experiencing it for the first time in my life. Like, you really need to give grace to yourself, or else it's gonna really eat at you and make you feel kind of like disgusting inside, because you're like, oh, I should have handled that better. Don't hold the weight of it. You need to recognize what you did wrong, forgive it, and see what you can do better next time. Oh my gosh, my brother, like, for a situation like, oh my gosh, my brother almost overdosed. Now you know to hold Narcan in your room if it comes to it. It's like, you can do the best you can, and you can only learn for the better, you know? Or you can be like, wow, I really need to move out because this is affecting my mentality, you know? Whatever solution seems best for you and feels right to you, take that action. Take the action and learn to kind of space yourself from that situation even further. My last step is that you can either, you know, forgive the situation and move on from it. You're fully free to leave anything you don't want to be a part of. If someone stabbed you in the back, you don't need to go back. You can forgive and forget that situation and move on. But if it's like a repeating thing where you have to see this person at family events maybe, or just throughout school, kind of forgive and act like you don't know them. Just forget it completely. And that might be harder, like that's easier said than done, because in a physical space where you guys kind of have to deal with each other, it can be more stressful if you're seeing that person without giving yourself the proper time and space. So take the rest from it and really forgive the situation and kind of forget it, or just accept it for what it is and just be like, that's your life, that's your path, that's your choice. I'm moving on with mine. I'm going to continue doing my own thing. Like, I have no business, and I don't want any business in whatever you're doing over there. You don't have to take ownership. You don't have to take accountability of what's going on after the situation, you know? If you've already accepted it, you've already apologized, you don't need to continue to feel guilty about seeing it going throughout the halls. Like, that's just flowing. That's not even in my energy. Like, just forget about it. But it was easier to accept now with my mom, because even now, I always know she's not gonna like actually put in the effort. So now it kind of takes away that urge to be like, oh, I really wanna like do something with her and try and connect. But if my mom's not gonna give me the time or the energy, or she's not gonna answer the phone about it, I'm not gonna do it, you know? And, you know, people might come back in asking for more opportunities or another chance. And the thing is, you have to see, are they still that third person? Are they still just the boss? You know, is this still just that person who only sees you as an employee, you know, nothing else, doesn't care about your emotions or whatever you went through? Or is it just like a situation where they are still that third person character, they're just a crackhead, they're that minority? You don't have to go back. And I suggest you don't go back, because it's just going to repeat that same stress and same cycle. But it's easier to continue through it without expecting something different, because you just know what they are. You know who they are. And you no longer have to be sad or stressed about it, because it's just like, oh my God, you know, that's just that. That's just the horse, you know. He's always by the well, but he never drinks it. I guess, like, that's just him. You just gotta let people kind of do their own thing. Just continue doing it because they're like, oh, you know, and that's their life, you know. That's just their choice, and you're gonna have to continue moving through life trying to do better for yourself without letting them affect that mentality, you know. If it's like an ex from 5 years ago, you know, if you did have an ex from 5 years ago and he came back today, what would you think? You'd be like, dude, we were in middle school, you know. Like, in my opinion, I'd be like, are you serious right now? You kind of just have to view from that perspective and be like, dude, that was so long ago. Like, that situation, you just are what you are. Like, you obviously have stayed that way. I'm just going to let you be that. You know, I'm fine living without that in my future, you know. And sometimes you kind of just have to accept the situation as that, because it won't change. And even if they try and change and then they don't change, just don't give it time. Accept it for what it is. This is definitely like a way that helped me use forgiveness to move on from difficult situations. And I've kind of started to use that with other people too. But that is essentially the main part of my video. Mainly just using forgiveness and a mix of acceptance. Just kind of accepting the person for what it is and finding ways to move through it. Accepting your emotions and seeing what do you want from this and just keep doing you. And that was my video for today. I hope your guys' New Year's is going well. I'm blessing you the best for 2026.